Hello everyone and welcome. Thank you for joining, where in this video we'll be taking a look at Linear Fusion Rifle DPS and seeing if they're as bad as their reputation would suggest. Now this won't be a video that's comparing a number of different perks on a particular weapon and then attempting to establish what a god roll might be, but rather testing a selection of Linear Fusion Rifles and seeing if any can come close to the results from my rocket launcher video, for example. Now at the start of Season 13, I didn't have a single Linear Fusion Rifle other than the exotics. Not a single one. This means there is only one legendary being looked at in this video, with two perk combinations and they're both, overall, rather well rolled. So we'll be starting with Threaded Needle. One of them will be tested with Clown Cartridge and Vorpal Weapon, while the other has Rapid Hit and Frenzy. I'll discuss the battery perks when looking at each one individually, and for anyone that doesn't know, Vorpal Weapon grants a 15% damage buff to bosses and mages and is active all the time, so no need to proc. Frenzy, on the other hand, grants a 20% damage buff to every enemy type, but it takes 12 seconds of almost constant combat to proc, and if you remove yourself from combat for 4 to 5 seconds, I can't remember exactly what it is, you lose the buff. Anyway, as well as Threaded Needle, we'll also take a look at all the exotics. So that will be the Queenbreaker, tested with both the Marksman sights perk and then the combat sights perk. The next will then be Arbalest. Now I know, it uses special ammo and is more suited to PvP and will never be considered a DPS weapon, but I didn't really want to leave it out. And finally, it will be Sleeper Simulant. This has been tested without the catalyst and then again with the catalyst, so we can see what kind of difference that provides. As always, one loader mod was equipped and there were no mods used to increase reserve size. Threaded Needle has only been tested with a major spec mod, as when equipping a backup mag mod, it didn't actually increase the magazine size at all, but the battery perks will play a part here. So first up, Threaded Needle number 1. This was tested with Projection Fuse, increasing range, and also Clown Cartridge and Vorpal Weapon. Now, Projection Fuse was chosen as it doesn't affect charge time, reload speed, impact damage, etc, and it was also an option on the other Threaded Needle being tested. This means it's a level playing field for the two when comparing the perks in the third and fourth columns. Of course, you can get battery perks that will increase impact damage at the cost of charge time, increase magazine size at the cost of reload speed, etc, so it's possible the DPS numbers you see here can go higher, or maybe even lower. So, precision damage against Carl was 46,755. I was able to hold 17 rounds in total with nothing to boost this, so total damage was 794,835. When testing the timings, I started with 5 rounds, reloaded and had 7 due to Clown Cartridge, and finished off with 6 rounds in the final magazine. Please note though that Clown Cartridge will allow 8 in the magazine, and maybe more with the right battery perk. Now with base reserves coming in at 17 and Clown Cartridge allowing a minimum of 6 in the magazine after reloading, but not after rallying to the flag, which is why I've chosen to start with 5, you'll always fire everything with only 2 reloads required. So the time to fire 17 is always the same, in this case 20.73 seconds. Because of this, Clown Cartridge can boost DPS at certain points, but when calculating it after emptying reserves, it doesn't really matter if you get 8 in a magazine or only 6. And for anyone wondering, reload time came in around 1.7 to 2 seconds, as there was a little variation there. Anyway, with total damage being 794,835 and it taking 20.73 seconds to do that damage, DPS comes in at 38,342. So now it's Threaded Needle number 2. This also had Projection Fuse as the battery perk, so only increasing range, but in the third and fourth column it was Rapid Hit and Frenzy. Damage per round with Frenzy procced was 48,788. As before, I was able to hold 17 in reserves, so total damage comes in at 829,396. So for timings, I found reload speed when stood in a well with Lunafaction boots plus 2 loader mods was the same as Rapid Hit fully procced, Frenzy procced and 1 loader mod. So I've assumed this is maxed out, which actually came in around 1.3 seconds, and why I'm testing the timings stood in a Warlock's well. Total time to fire all 17 rounds was 19.97 seconds, so almost 0.8 seconds faster than the first Threaded Needle, despite a third reload being required. This consisted of 3 magazines of 5 and a final of 2, with total damage coming in at 829,396. This brings DPS to 41,532. So this is higher than all rocket launchers tested in my last video, with the exception of Code Duello with Impact Casing, Impulse Amplifier and Frenzy. Moving on to the exotics now, and it's the Queenbreaker. This has been tested with both the Marksman Sights perk and Combat Sights perk, the former increasing impact damage at the cost of charge time, and the latter doing the opposite, decreasing impact and faster charge time. So we'll start with Marksman Sights. Damage per round was 41,155 and I was able to hold 18 in reserves, meaning total damage was 740,790. I could hold 5 rounds in each magazine and reload time was fairly consistent, coming in almost exactly 1.85 seconds every time. And I say it like that as not every reload is the same. So total time for this was 23.95 seconds, the longest in the test, therefore DPS is 30,931. Sticking with the Queenbreaker again, but with the Combat Sights perk, damage now drops to 29,723, which is almost 11,500 less than with the Marksman Sights perk. So for 18 rounds, this means total damage is just 535,014. But, of course, charge time is much faster now, and with the same number in each magazine, the same number in reserves, and reload time coming in pretty much the same as well, it now taken 18.15 seconds to fire all rounds. This means DPS is 29,477, so almost 1,500 less than Marksman Sights. And now it's Arbalest, and I wouldn't get too excited about this one. Damage per round was 33,670 and I could hold 17 rounds in total, remembering these are all with no mods to boost reserves. This means total damage was 572,390. Each magazine could hold 5 and reload time averaged just under 2.1 seconds. Total time to fire all rounds was the second slowest in the test at 22.23 seconds. Therefore DPS was 25,749. Next up is Sleeper Simulant, and first without the Catalyst. This does 61,583 damage per round and could hold just 9 in reserves, which means total damage was 554,247. Now, it could only hold 3 in the magazine, so 2 reloads were required to empty all 9 rounds, and they taken around 2.18 seconds. Total time to fire all those 9 was 16.55 seconds, therefore DPS without the Catalyst is 33,489. And for Sleeper Simulant with the Catalyst, this now has a faster charge time and an extra 2 rounds due to the new addition of accelerated coils, which decreases charge time and apparently also decreases impact damage, but that wasn't the case here, and also deeper pockets, which is what provides those extra 2 rounds. So damage per round remained the same at 61,583, but now with 11 in reserves. This means total damage is 677,413. Now, reload time stays the same of course, but that reduced charge time is what improves DPS, and when we get to the graph, you'll see that it actually makes quite a big difference. Time to empty all 11 rounds is around 18 seconds, which means DPS is 37,571. Coming onto the screen now is a table, as usual, ranking them in order of DPS from best to worst. Pause the video now if you want a little time to look at this as we're moving on to the graph. So sticking to the order tested, we're starting with Threaded Needle with Clown Cartridge and Vorpal Weapon. Not much to say without other weapons, so now it's Threaded Needle with Rapid Hit and Frenzy. Now this is always pulling away due to it doing more damage per round, and you can see that the reload times are much faster compared to the Clown Cartridge and Vorpal Weapon variants. Even for that second reload where Clown Cartridge has provided 7 in the magazine for the Threaded Needle number 1, the Rapid Hit and Frenzy variant still manages to not fall behind, and once it starts firing again for the 3rd magazine, it's game over and pulls ahead even more. The Queenbreaker with Marksman Sights now, and it can't compare. At no point is it even close to either Threaded Needles, apart from at the very beginning when only 1 or 2 rounds have been fired. The Queenbreaker with Combat Sights now, and it's the same results. It's back and to a little with Marksman Sights, but generally it's below and also can't get close to either Threaded Needle. Arbalest now, a bit of a meme weapon for a DPS test, and that's even worse. Yes, I know it can be great in PvP, DPS just isn't its thing. And now Sleeper Simulant without the Catalyst, a relatively strong start, not falling too far behind either Threaded Needles and pulling ahead of everything else. But with only 3 in the magazine, it can't maintain that performance, causing it to fall behind and jump back and forth with the Queenbreaker with the Marksman sights perk. And finally, Sleeper Simulant with the Catalyst. Now this has a lot of potential. It has the best burst DPS over the first 3 to 3.5 seconds or so, but that small magazine is its downfall. And you can see that on the graph. It pulls ahead, but needs to reload earlier than the rest, then starts to catch up again, and almost takes over Threaded Needle with Rapid Hit and Frenzy, as you can see around the 8-second mark. But then it needs to reload again, and this time, on the next magazine, it can't catch up at all. Although it does, right at the very end, momentarily pull ahead of Threaded Needle with Clown Cartridge and Vorpal, but that doesn't really matter, as Threaded Needle pulls ahead straight away again as it has more in reserves. So, thoughts and conclusions. No, I don't think Linear Fusion Rifles are as bad for DPS as their reputation would suggest. If you use a certain one with the right perks, they're actually okay. The problem is competition and balance. For example, rocket launchers are in a reasonably good place for DPS now, and generally better for DPS than Linear Fusion Rifles. But a rocket launcher is just a single round in between reloads in most cases, with no need for a precision hit. Whereas fusion rifles require precision hits to extract the best possible DPS, and you also need to be consistent and land those crit shots over and over again, which is harder than firing a rocket. Let's not forget, rocket launchers can be very good for rad clear, fusion rifles not so much. I'm not saying rocket launchers need a nerf, but linear fusion rifles need a buff that will make them better for DPS. This is all about balance between risk, reward and utility. Swords have a very high risk but very high reward in the form of some of the best single weapon DPS in the game. That's very easy to achieve, and it's similar for slug shotguns. Relatively easy, but still come with high risk, so they do very good damage. What about snipers? Well, they could be considered low risk as you can keep your distance, but the requirement to aim and land all precision shots, plus the fact they're not good for ad clear, means they're generally a very good choice for DPS, if not quite as good as the high risk weapons already mentioned. Personally, I think linear fusion rifles should be a little better than snipers, but not as good as swords. They require a similar level of skill as snipers, but they don't quite have the range and therefore come with a little more risk, while of course they're a much safer option than swords or slug shotguns. Rocket launchers definitely shouldn't have typically higher DPS in my opinion, as they can be fired from as far away as snipers if the target isn't moving around, and are also extremely good for ad clear. As for Sleeper Simulant, Bungie could literally just give this weapon 5 in the magazine, and it would probably be the best DPS linear fusion rifle in the game, justifying its exotic slot. And this is just a magazine increase, no need to increase damage and worry about breaking the game in other areas, just an extra 2 in the mag. I've actually ran the numbers for this, simulated of course, and although they're not on screen, with 5 in the mag, by the 13-second mark, which will be 2 magazines, Sleeper Simulant would do over 47,000 DPS, which beats every rocket launcher from my last video, and means it would mingle with swords at the lower end of their table, only beating the ones with ranged heavy attacks. At some point I do want to test sniper rifles and see what they're like with these new on-screen damage numbers, but until then, or whatever the next video will be, that is all from me. I hope you enjoyed this one and found it helpful. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe and give me any feedback in the comments down below. As always, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.